Hello and welcome to today's podcast, 3 Ps in a Pod, Discovering Purpose, Connecting Pathways, and Pondering Perspectives. This is episode 10. I'm Lenora, your host. Thank you for listening. Make sure you click subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you'll receive notice for future episodes. Guess what? You matter. There is great hope for you and a great future possible for you. I wanted to remind you of that because have you noticed there's a whole lot of stress in our world right now? If you're struggling, you're not alone. Many are struggling with anxiety and depression, but we can learn how to struggle well. Beyond that, for those who have faced additional trauma, you're probably familiar with the term PTS or PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and the profound challenges people can face after trauma. Well, we're talking about that today. We're also talking about mental health and this question: can people achieve post-traumatic growth? Hint, the answer is yes. My guest today is Ken Falke, author of a book called Struggle Well. Ken is an expert in post-traumatic growth, the founder of BoulderCrest.org and Warrior Path that's taught at Boulder Crest Institute and can be licensed across the U.S. You're going to want to share this episode. Please share it with combat veterans, first responders, or really anyone struggling right now. You know what? Individuals and their families can live great lives in the aftermath of trauma. So let's jump right into this episode and our guest, which you're going to hear more about again, Ken Falke, and his book, Struggle Well. Welcome to the podcast. My name's Lenora, and I am very, very excited about a guest we have today, Ken Falke. If you don't know of Ken, I hope you end up reading his book and checking out his foundation and all the work he's done after hearing this podcast. But Ken served in the U.S. Navy as a bomb disposal specialist for 21 years. Thank you for your service. I know I'll be saying officially let you respond back in a second, but that's an amazing amount of time, and that's incredible work. And then you started AT Solutions, a counterterrorism company, which again is another profound and unbelievable thing to do in my world, as far as anything I'm aware of. And then you ended up selling that, and then founded EOD Warrior Foundation, and then since established Boulder Crest Retreat in both Virginia and in Arizona, and now Boulder Crest Institute. There's so many things we could talk about, Ken, but welcome to this podcast, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Lenora. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, would you tell just a little bit of your story? I realize that could take our entire podcast, but if you could give a summary of what you've done, and then we'll jump into your work on post-traumatic growth.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you the quick rundown. As I come from a family that was home based in Chicago and Pittsburgh. My dad's from Chicago. My mom was from Pittsburgh. I was born in Pittsburgh. My dad got out of the Army, became a cop in Washington, D.C., and we moved to D.C., where I kind of grew up. My mom died when I was a really young boy, 7 years old, and I spent most of my summers with my grandparents back in Chicago and Pittsburgh. And then one thing led to another. I kind of grew up in the summers in hockey camps playing hockey, became a pretty good hockey player, and thought that I would try out for the NHL because my high school career didn't go very well and my college acceptance opportunities were very limited. So I had a failed attempt at playing professional hockey, and a year later, after high school, enlisted in the Navy and had a great career. As you said, 21 years.
Yeah.
As a bomb disposal guy. But I got out of the Navy because I was at a point in my career where I was the senior enlisted rank, and, really supportive. A good senior enlisted guy should be supportive of the officers he worked with. And I had just had a couple officers that I just couldn't support. I didn't agree with their leadership style, their strategies, and finally just thought, the best thing for me might be to get out. And I got out and I started my own company, primarily because I had this misperception that, if you have your own company, you can be your own boss, which is never true because we all have customers and we all have employees. Right. But I also come from a long line of entrepreneurs. After my mom died, my dad started a construction business. My grandfather ran a refrigerated trucking business years ago. Way back in our family, we come, from textile businesses, and one of my grandfathers owned a big gun manufacturer. So we are a family of entrepreneurs, and I knew that working for yourself is really a great way. And we hit it off. We had a great company. We were supporting the war over and over again. And one thing led to another, and the company started creating value, and people started asking us to sell it. And when the number was right, we sold it. And you know, I miss it a lot. Some days I wish I wouldn't have sold it. Other days I'm very grateful. Philanthropically, it's allowed us the money, and our family has allowed us to do some really great things for people that, you know, that don't have the resources we have. So we feel really blessed about that. I did, after I sold AT Solutions, and I took a year off, I went to Georgetown and got a master's degree, and started a second company called Shoulder to Shoulder, and we did some more work. But my real joy in my life is these two nonprofits. I started the EOD Warrior Foundation back in 2004 and early in the war, and working with these EOD as explosive ordnance disposal or bomb disposal, and working with these men and women who had lost limbs, primarily amputees. And we started bringing them out to our house. We're an hour west of Washington, D.C. in Bluemont, Virginia.
Wow.
And one thing led to another, and my wife and I were walking on our land one day. We had an estate with 200 acres, and 37 acres of it were open pastures. And my wife said, you know, rather than having these families in our house all the time, why don't we build them some cabins down here on the pastures? That's how Boulder Crest got started in Virginia.
Well, the property is stunning.
It is beautiful. It really is. And our biggest donor here in Virginia was the Clark family out of Bethesda, Maryland, a Washington, D.C. based family. And they gave us a $10 million gift a few years ago to open up a second facility, which is in south of Tucson, Arizona. And that's what I do now. Primarily, I've retired from the EOD Warrior Foundation. There's a new chairman of the board over there. And I'm really focused now on two things. One is getting money in our coffers to sustain Boulder Crest, and also to scale the work we're doing in post-traumatic growth nationwide.
Well, you're kind of a motivated person. You've got a lot done, and it's pretty impressive. So I think I know the term post-traumatic growth was very new to me, sadly. I've learned more and more in the last couple of years because of my work and just some of my friendships in the veteran community, to learn about even more about post-traumatic stress. I think that is a pretty known term, post-traumatic stress or PTSD. But because you can articulate it much better than I could, would you make a statement of what is PTS or PTSD and what is PTG? I mean, realize we're going to go more into it later, so I'm just wanting to sum it down. Then I have more questions for you.
At the highest level, PTSD is a combination of anxiety, depression, nightmares, you know, substance abuse. It's a variety of things that kind of come together. And I mean, literally, if you think of the words post-traumatic stress,
right, it's
stress that occurs in our body after a traumatic event. Now, normally, and the way it's defined is that traumatic event should be or is life-threatening. So a life-threatening event that creates a level of stress in our bodies that we can't, without some sort of support, can't get rid of on our own. That's how the mental health community diagnoses post-traumatic stress. And post-traumatic growth is not a disease. Post-traumatic growth is the outcome of living with these traumas and growing from the bad things that happen to us, learning from them and growing. And that's really what you know, at the highest level, what PTSD and PTG are.
Thank you for that. And I think, again, people are familiar with PTS or PTSD. I read, when I was reading your book called Struggle Well, I was hearing that there's still unfortunately, a whole lot of work that people are trying to do with post-traumatic stress, and so much of it, sadly, from what I read, is not effective. So why do you think a lot of the things being done is not effective?
Well, let me start first, because a lot of times the things that I say, I'm not a big fan of traditional medicine, period.
Right. Okay.
I'm not a big fan at all of the traditional mental health approach. You know, the mental health community has tried to ride the coattails of the medical community. We pathologize, you know, everything's got a disease. You're either bipolar, depressed, or anxious, and these are things that happen to everybody, right? I mean, everybody's a little bipolar. Everybody's got some depression sometime in their life. Everybody suffers with some level of anxiety. I'm sitting here with you today, and my grandson's in the hospital. We have some anxiety around that. Yeah. So, but to pathologize that, to medicate it, to treat it, it just turns into this pharmaceutical cocktail that takes you down a road that nothing good comes out of, internally in your body, externally in your actions. So, but let me also say this. So know that I'm not a big fan of traditional medicine and traditional mental health at all. Traditional medicine, obviously we have our grandson in the hospital now. He's being treated by doctors. Right. I'm very grateful for that. And I'm sure the things that they're doing are the right things to do. But I also want to say that if people are getting success in their treatment through these people, through traditional mental health and cognitive processing therapy or prolonged exposure, a therapy dog, whatever it might be that's helping you, then I'm very grateful for that as well. But here's the facts. Only about 30% of the people who seek out traditional mental health care will in fact see results, get better, if you will.
30%.
30%, a third. Now, that's a third of the people that go. The stigma around mental health in general terms prevents most people from ever getting in the door. So think about, let's just say in the veteran community specifically, they say only about 50% of veterans who are in need of mental health will go seek out treatment. Okay. So we start with a pool of 100%, 50% of them never go to the doctor. Of the 50% that do, 30% of them get some sort of relief from their PTSD. So in my mind, you work in a Fortune 500 company, you think of any metric in the world where 30% is good enough, right? It's not good enough on the football field, in the hockey rink. It's not good enough in corporate America. It's not good enough for cancer. Why is it good enough for mental health? Mm-hmm. On the subject of substance abuse, very similar results, but about a 97% recidivism rate in substance abuse. Yet our insurance companies pay hand over fist in dollars for the care, and people don't get better. So it's mind-blowing to me, and that's why I'm so down on the community, is because there seems to be a major lack of innovation. There's a major challenge to the status quo, right? Mm-hmm. People go through college, and I understand it, don't get me wrong. To be a mental health therapist, you have to have a master's degree. So you've got to go through a lot of college. It's a cookie cutter model. So people are getting what they call manualized techniques. They get a book that says, here's how you treat somebody. And if that's the only thing and that's the only way you can provide treatment, it's not going to work, because every one of us are different as humans, and all of our traumas are different. But these manuals in the system prevent people from doing anything innovative.
Well, those numbers are incredibly difficult to hear. It's because you think of the challenges, you think of our current environment with the other things going on. You've got more people under other additional types of stress. That's part of why I wanted to talk about the books, Post-Traumatic Growth and Struggle Well, because sadly I've been learning more and more about issues and more about friends of mine who are struggling. I've been through very difficult times, not the want to compare my trauma to some things people have faced, but whether it was cancers where you're just the saddest things and you're having to feel so powerless and watch someone pass away, and you go through your own personal breakdown, whether it's in the family, and you just have suffered some very deep pain, and you think, you don't want to get stuck there. What I don't want people to think is that you're forever stuck with this impacts of trauma. I'm one that has to believe there has to be ways out. There has to be solutions. There has to be hope, or, it's not a good thing. So I'm a huge believer in it. That's why I got very excited when I was told about your book, Struggle Well. I loved the title, Struggle Well, because people all struggle, and some have had more struggles than others based on what you were born in. what may have happened, our own choices sometimes, but trauma can be very real. So tell me a little bit about that topic, or why you came up with that title and dove in and actually wrote the book called Struggle Well.
Yeah. So I went on a journey and around the United States to meet with some of the top mental health professionals in the world before I ever got into the business. When we built Boulder Crest, this retreat, the concept of it was for families just to come out from the hospital and stay here, kind of respite. Okay. And we also were hosting some programs that would help them heal faster through their processes. You know, we looked at all sorts of traditional medicine, non-traditional medicine, to include chiropractic care, acupuncture, acupressure, massage therapies, dogs, horse therapy, a whole variety of different things. And what we found was that we thought that we would be better to have our own program and be more in control. So I wanted to learn about building a program and kind of learn from the best. And on that journey, you know, a very disappointing journey with these mental health professionals, I ended up running into a guy that I have the utmost respect for today, Dr. Rich Tadeschi at the University of North Carolina, who had coined this term post-traumatic growth in 1995. And post-traumatic growth is nothing new. The concept, the term is very new in 1995, but the concept of it isn't very new. And I had somebody say to me, well, you know, growth isn't possible after trauma, not for everybody. And I said, well, if it wasn't possible, we'd be extinct with the dinosaurs, right? It's like all of us, no matter who we are as human beings, no matter where you're from, all of us live a life that looks like a sine wave, right? Of ups and downs. And you mentioned, you know, death, or you have to put your dog down, or, you know, as me today, I'm sitting here with my grandson in the hospital. And then tomorrow he'll get out of the hospital and I'll have this high. And, you know, you have these ups and downs.
Right.
The key is to figure out how to live a sine wave that's really easy, you know, easy in the sense that it doesn't look like this, up and down and up and down.
So because high, not so low.
Not so highs and not so lows, right? The highs of, oh, I'm going to solve all my problems today. I'm going to go out and buy myself a new car. And then 2 days later, I wake up to realize that I can't afford a $500 a month car payment. Now I'm back in depression with financial problems. And the truth is, you know, when you get really low, depression is very, very difficult to get out of.
Right.
For lots of reasons. But this is another reason that I get so frustrated with the mental health community, is that they have even coined a term now, a diagnosis called TRD, which is treatment-resistant depression. So the mental health professional says, I can't help you. It's all your fault because you're treatment-resistant.
Oh, wow.
And it's crazy to me. So what we believe is that, you know, to live this life of a sine wave that looks normal, up and down, you need two critical things in your life. The first one is this ability to self-regulate, to be able to sit here in a very stressful situation, take a deep breath, know that things are going to get better, and that the things that are out of your control, that you can't control, that we can't take on as those self-regulation practices come in forms of things like breathing, exercise, meditation, reading, walks. You know, you think of it, there's a lot of things we can do to self-regulate. I remember my dad when I was a kid, if I got all frustrated, he would say, listen, Kenny, breathe, or go for a run, or get out on the ice rink, you know, go do something to calm. And those things really all resonate with me. On the other end of that sine wave, so we got regulation practices, is what we refer to as the 3 to 5. Because as humans, we become the average of the 3 to 5 people we spend the most time with.
Right.
So if you're spending time with 3 to 5 drunks, you're going to be a drunk. Spending time with 3 to 5 drug addicts, you'll probably go down that road. Spending time with 3 to 5 entrepreneurs, or, you know, successful mentors and people that you admire and you look up to, you'll probably go in that direction. Now, that's very difficult for a lot of people, because a lot of people are bound by these relationships that are toxic and very difficult to get out of. So all of that is where we come to work. Now, Tadeschi had studied post-traumatic growth, primarily parents who had lost children to cancer. And he also had studied some Vietnam veterans, some prisoners of war, to find out that prisoners of war had come back from the Vietnam War a lot healthier than some of their peers had.
I read that. I was blown away. I kept hearing the statistics on that when you talked about, I think it was 30% of people had post-traumatic stress from after being, during their time in war, and then you talked about the percentage of those who had been prisoners of war. And I've been doing the same thing. I've been asking everybody, what do you think the number is? And they always do the same thing I did, is say, well, I don't know, 80%, 100, or, and then I say, it's like 4. And everyone does the same thing I did. No way. How is that possible? So again.
Yeah, it's crazy. But what I said to Tadeschi was, so Tadeschi is studying the outcomes, watching these families grow, coining the term, measuring them. He has a measurement portfolio or a series of questions called the post-traumatic growth indicators. So through a series of questions, they can see what your growth is tracked and modeled on. Mm-hmm. But I said to Tadeschi, I said, have you ever taught anybody how to achieve post-traumatic growth in their life? And he looked at me like really intrigued, and he said, I never have. And I said, what if we could expedite the process? What if we could teach people the right things that they need in their lives and take that framework and let them grow a lot faster than they would in a normal situation? Mm-hmm. In a scenario, let's say like a family who's lost a child to cancer, there's going to be a grieving process. And we know that process, based on lots and lots of metrics, lasts from anywhere from 3 months to a year, where it's very difficult to see growth. But after a year, you can start to see some growth. So we know the grieving process does get in the way a lot of healing, but it's also a process that's required to get better.
I'm one that learned from needing to how important grief is, and how if people don't ever even stop and grieve and allow themselves to grieve, they can get stuck, and it can be a underlying reason for not progressing forward, because you're not allowing yourself to just, weep with those who weep, or being able to grieve as you need to, and then find that hope. There's so many parts and pieces to this. What I loved about your approach was, I think 2 words: proven, scalable. That you had this PTG was shown to really be effective after you were doing all your research. And then the question to say, which clearly fits your entrepreneurial thinking and what you did in the past, you want something that can be scaled. What's scalable? What can we do and build and expand? So, bravo.
That's what we did with Tadeschi. I just said he said he was willing to help us, and we put together a curriculum, which I think is the basis of scaling anything. Mm-hmm. And, we had Boulder Crest, Virginia, and Arizona. So we had 2 places to kind of experiment with the curriculum. And now what we're doing is licensing the curriculum out to partners around the nation. We had a partner in Florida, Georgia, Maine, South Carolina. Next year, Washington State. So we're making some real good progress with scaling the curriculum out and around to other nonprofit organizations.
Is it going to be called Boulder Crest as well, or are they going to?
No, Boulder Crest is the program we run is called Warrior Path, and that's what the programs will run. But it'll be different nonprofits. So in Florida, the nonprofit is called Gratitude America, but they run our Warrior Path program. Mm-hmm. The nonprofit in Washington State is called the PTSD Foundation, Permission to Start Dreaming, and they're going to run our Warrior Path program. So we train them how to run it. We oversee it for a couple of months, and then they run it. They go out and run it on their own.
So what do you recommend for people to best, because we're talking for a few minutes on this. There is so much information in your book, information out there. Again, I'm just learning about it, but you have me reading several things now. You don't realize that, but I've been going on to other resources going, okay, I want to grab a hold of this better, because I see the need so much. And again, having walked through other parts of my own life, it really began to help me, I think, get away from being afraid of my own pain or somebody else's pain, and to say, it's okay, if you can face this, you can get through it and get to something much better, where life can become clear again. Life can become, you can see a blue sky again, in the sense of hope and really love being on the planet. And I know personally I struggled, and for no good reason. I could look back and see reasons why, but I struggled in my 20s, wanting to be on the planet for certain times and thinking that's not a good place to be. But I know if you don't have hope for a future, it's hard to get out of that. And that was a piece of beginning to get me beyond where I was stuck to thinking of a future and finding a very great path towards some things. And I'm a person of faith, so that was huge and a huge piece of my path. But for someone who is struggling right now, or someone has in their family struggling very much with depression or post-traumatic stress, what is one or two things you'd say, hey, point to you to what?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me say something. I'm glad to hear your story and that you're here. Suicide is why I'm in this business, because in the 125 Americans a day, today with COVID, 128 Americans a day are taking their own lives. 20 of those are veterans. And we don't even know that these numbers are right, but they're close enough for argument's sake. But 20 of my brothers and sisters, people who were great soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardmen, are killing themselves because of things that they've seen on the battlefield, the poor transition they get out of the military to the civilian life, unemployment, no resources to raise their family. You name it, there's a list of things. So what I tell everybody is that the truth about suicide, and you used the word several times, it's a disease of hopelessness. And when you get to the point of hopelessness where that becomes the answer, it's very low. So how do you stay from getting there? And that's what our book is based on. We have a wellness model of 4 areas of wellness: mind, body, financial, and spiritual wellness. And our mission, and what I tell everybody, is you have got to work every day. Life's not hard, life is hard work. Every day you have to get up and you have to work hard to ensure that in those 4 areas of your life, you're doing something to get better. So in our mind, what are we doing? We're maybe meditating, praying, doing something that brings us back together to where we're not just living this proverbial life of the tail wagging the dog. We're in control. We're up every morning and we know what we've got to do. We've made a list of things to get done and we're working towards that. So our mind, we're in control of. On our body, I always tell people, are we fat or are we fit? And when you start to get really fat, and I'm not trying to, I've had challenges myself since retirement with weight. When you get into a point where diabetes and heart conditions and all this stuff stop, it creates a very difficult life for you. And not only for you, but for the people around you that love you, people that have to take care of you. So, and I'm not saying everybody's got to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I mean, we've got to work on fitness. You've got to get up every morning and do something, a walk, some push-ups, something that allows you to, live a life. And I mean, I see this I've been working with amputees since 2004. I had a young man who's lost all 4 limbs. And every morning he gets up and does some exercise, puts his prosthetic legs on, he goes for a walk, he does sit-ups. It doesn't matter where you're at in life, you can get better. On finances, I tell everybody the same thing my dad told me: don't spend more than you make. Americans, we moan and groan about how bad Congress is in spending, but the truth is the average American family has so much debt, it's very difficult to get out of. Why do we need new cars every 3 years? Why do we need these long-term mortgages? Be very careful and trying to overcome your depression with material solutions. It doesn't work, right? A new car makes you feel better for a couple days. Right. It's not going to make you feel better for a long time. Matter of fact, it's probably going to make you feel worse because of the payments, the new insurance costs, and all of that. So don't try to solve these spiritual problems, which is the last element of our wellness triangle. Don't try to solve your spiritual problems with material solutions. It doesn't work. And then spiritually, what are you doing? And we measure, in a very non-religious sense. And if you are religious, then you will find this, to be even greater, I think. But in a non-religious sense, I measure religiosity or kind of spirituality in 3 ways. The first one is your relationships to others. Do you really have that 3 to 5? These people that you are around that are healthy in your life? Are you in a position where you can prune the bad people, the toxic people out of your life? The other way I measure spirituality is in your service to others. Are you doing something for somebody other than yourself? That in itself, right? I mean, regardless of what religion you are or what you believe, if we just did two things that Jesus said, because we can't argue that there was a guy named Jesus that walked on this earth, was a pretty good guy by all accounts, and had a great mission for us. But treat people the way you want to be treated, and help people that can't help themselves. Mm-hmm. If you are doing those types of things, and you can start. You don't have to do what I've done and have a nonprofit, but start with small acts of kindness. Go down to a local soup bank or soup kitchen and feed people on the weekends, or go to the local food banks and help them stack the shelves, or do a food bank run. I mean, these small acts of kindness that you can do that really, although they're great for other people, they're really good for us internally. So, that's kind of really what I tell everybody to work on. There's no secret answer. The answer is to create a life worth living. And that prevents us from getting into hopelessness. So there's 4 areas to work on, and those are the 4 areas. And you can learn a lot more in the book.
Yeah, I thought the book was incredibly practical. You go through some very honest conversations. You've got some very practical tools, so you can take it. It's a step at a time. This kind of work, and depending on what you started with, is whether you have knowledge of what the better life even looks like, or so it's getting through that process. But you're giving things so people can help see what that means, what you just shared, but with more detail and some more resources. And then you take a step at a time. And like you talked about, hope for your future matters, getting to where it's not just lost in the, because that I understand that depression. You can just get to where you just become so internal focused, and it's just a way to sink down very far. But you can get back out of it. Life can become very, very good. But I also thought a massive key was that 3 to 5 people. I think that is such a big deal, of being connected to others, so that you can help be accountable with each other, have those connections. I listened to once a while back, and I think it was a TED Talk, saying about there's an epidemic of loneliness. People need people. We need each other. And when you've transitioned out of the military, which has quite a network, you're connected for all the different reasons. And then if you don't rebuild that in various ways, you're going to feel pretty lost. That's definitely going to be a very human result. How can people get more involved with what you get this message out, so that more people hear of this concept and see the numbers where you are getting more success than what is out there with most other attempts and approaches?
Well, I mean, our website is bouldercrest.org, O-R-G. Start there. There's a lot of great information. The book has its own website, strugglewell.com. You can get a copy of the book. You can hear an audio book. I think we've got it on Kindle as well. So there's a lot of ways to see the book and read it. We've had some great feedback on the book, and I appreciate your comment about it being, kind of prescriptive, because we had seen a lot of post-traumatic growth books, but they were all about other people's stories. Susie had been in a car accident and, couldn't walk, and a year later she climbed Mount Everest. But it doesn't necessarily relate. I have no interest in climbing Mount Everest. So that her story was inspirational, but it doesn't really kind of tell me how I could do my version of that. And that's what we really wanted Struggle Well to be, and kind of what can I do every day to get up? Because we measure success really simply. We define success as doing better today than we did yesterday. Mm-hmm. And it's simply that good, and creating this hope in our lives, having a job and sleeping well at night, working on that wellness triangle, all that stuff makes sense. So volunteering at Boulder Crest is an option if you're in Virginia and Arizona. We really always need volunteer support. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Share our posts. There's a lot of things you can do. We're not privately funded nonprofit. We need to raise over $6 million, almost $7 million a year. So financial contributions are always welcome. But I also know that's challenging for a lot of people too. I tell everybody, when it comes to helping nonprofits, there's really 3 ways to help. One is to be a cheerleader, to be a volunteer, and to be a donor, and a financial donor. And those 3 things all help. And a cheerleader is the easiest. It's all sharing our Facebook post or sharing a LinkedIn a post. that stuff's big, because although you may not have financial means to help us, maybe somebody in your network does get inspired by our work and has those means. So I hope that helps. And anything else, you can reach out to me at ken@strugglewell.com if you need to get hold of me. I'm very open and happy to help anybody that's in need.
Well, I sure appreciate this, and I absolutely will help be that promoter of your work. I'm hopeful too that you'll get a chance to testify in front of Congress. How do you get your chance to do that? I mean, this is a big need everyone's aware of. You've got the street cred to do it. I just think it needs to get out to all kinds of different avenues for people to understand this post-traumatic growth concept. So again, love your book. It's one of those I'm marking up, and I've been telling people about it. A few people have picked it up already, and they're reading it themselves too. I think it's just so practical, and anyone will benefit from it. There are so many ways in life where people struggle. I'm a fan. So you definitely, Ted Lucas made you a new fan for sure, and I just want to help create more of those, because our veterans matter. Everybody matters, and I think that hope for the future is critical, and people are so valuable. I think often they don't realize, no, your life is incredibly valuable, and it can be great, and we need each other to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen. I'm a big fan of that story. I think we're all valuable. We all need to help each other to be successful.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And again, try to get more people to understand what you're doing. And again, thank you so much for your service and everything you've been doing since then. And I hope your grandson is all fine and well.
Thank you. Thank you, Lenora. Thanks for the podcast.
You're very welcome. Thank you for listening to this episode. You can get your copy of Struggle Well online or on your Kindle app. And you'll want to visit bouldercrest.org to learn more. This episode was sponsored by LenoraDiane.com. Please remember to go to your favorite podcast app and click subscribe.